We are holding on Amud Tes Zayin at the top of the page, 3 words from the end. And we have just introduced the Shitta of the Rekanti. And we're going to spend a while explaining this Shitta of the Rekanti. Until now, the Rebbe Rashab has explained how, in the long bracket that we didn't do, how the Maimah here in Pasach Eliyahu is going according to the Shitta of the Rekanti. And the Shitta of the Rekanti Bekitzur is saying that Atzilus, when we talk about Atzilus, the Maila, sort of the inyan of how this is a Mamash Chadim Atzmus, etc., that's a reference to the Eiris. But when you're talking about the Hakbala, that's talking about the Kalim. So unlike the Shittas Hama'areches, which said that all of the Gedorim, the Hakbalis, the Gvul of the Kalim, was something which was Nichlal in the Eiris, which itself was Nichlal in the Eish Lifnei Atzimtzum, and it was all Nishtalshal from there. That was Shittas Hama'areches. According to the Rekanti, there is and so therefore fundamentally there's no real difference between the Eiris and the Kalim. In that the Kalim is just in what we call Atzilus. That both the Eiris and Kalim are called Svirus and the Eiris and Kalim are called Atzilus. Because in the Eiris and Kalim, the Kalim is just a more of a realized form of the Eir. Mashenkin the Rekanti identifies the Eiris and Kalim as being much more fundamentally distinct from each other. The Eir is Pashut, the Eir is Mein HaMoir, the Eir has no Hischalkus of Eser. All of that is in the Kalim. Because there are many things we say about Atzilus that are seemingly self-contradictory. And this is where the Rekanti comes is very helpful. On the one hand, you have from Sefer Yetzirah, Eser Sfiris Bli Ma. They have no Mahus, they have no Metzias. So how can be Eser and have no Bli Ma? We have an Inyan that they're Bli Gvul. It's Ein Sof. And at the same time, we're saying it's Tafke Eser V'lei Teisha Eser V'lei Echad. So we have these two sort of descriptions of Atzilus which seem to be in conflict with each other. So through the Rekanti, you see that when we say the Inyanim of Eser V'lei Teisha, that's a reference to the Kalim. When we talk about Eser V'lei Bli Ma, that's a reference to the Eir. Okay, there's obviously still a lot more work that needs to be done to explain this, and there's a lot of questions on it. So the first question is the question of Shinui. That the Eirin Seif, which is Poyel, which the Rekanti he himself tries to deal with, the Eirin Seif, which is Poyel in the Spheres, doesn't cause a Shinui in the Eir. This Eir, which is Atzilus, we have to somehow, he wants to explain how the Eir can be mislabish in the Kalim, but at the same time not be affected by it, not be nishtana by it, not be changed by that experience. The Eir does not become Chochmah. The Eir does not become Chesed. It's Poyel al Yedei HaChochmah, it's Poyel al Yedei HaChesed, but it retains its Pshitus. So that's the thing we're going to talk about today. How there's no Shinui, how it retains its Pshitus. And we're going to hopefully go through a ganz lange shtickle. I want to get to today already even Amud. I want to get to Amud Chaf. Yeah, we're gonna get moving.
We get to Chaf.
Yeah, okay. We need to get some momentum. Yeah,
let's do it.
So you're ready? Okay, let's go. Top of the page, Amud Tes Zayin. 3 words in from the end of the line. So the Rekanti himself says as follows: Moshul lezel lemelech echad sheyesh leishnei avodim. Give a moshul of how there's no shinui in the Eir, even though it's mislabish in the Kalim, is from a moshul of a king who has 2 servants. And one of them, he gives a command, when you see a person walking in an upright way, in an appropriate way, to sayelai, then you should help him, and save him from his enemies. And to the second servant, when he sees somebody going in a bad way, then he should rebuke him until he returns and comes back comes back from this bad path. So when the servants of the king go and fulfill his command, the king is not doing anything. He just helps his servants be able to do what they need to do. The action, what's getting done, is being done by the servants and not the king. So it's the same thing as with the Eibishter. He's mashpil midis lasis pu'ulasam. He's in a sense, he's mashpil to the midis, which is like in the moshul would be like his commands to his servants to do this and that. But he's not affected by the enactment of these actions. It's the midis, which in according to the Irkanti, that will be the kalim of Atzilus. They are oisim pulasam. Like it says in the Maim Elio, Ant hu da apikas asati kunim. You are the one who brought forth 10 tikunim. For what purpose? Lan hagaha v'hinalmin, to fear the belt, to run the world. Behem b'chinas kalim, and that is a reference to the kalim. Shehein lan hagaha v'hinalmin. They are the ones which manage the world. Because they are they are relational. They have an association with the ilamis, a comparability of sorts, and they're shaykh to it. On the ha'oir ba'etzem who poshet b'tachlis v'einim shana, but the oir is poshet and does not get changed or affected by the activities of the kelim. Now, that's the Rekanti's attempt at dealing with the issue of shinui. Now have a look in the Pardes where the Ramak asks a question on the Rekanti on this, and the issue that the Pardes has is on second. It's like making it as if that the Eibish in the Moshul, the king Taka doesn't do anything. The king's not involved. He just sets things in motion, but he's not involved. It's like saying that all of the impact in the world, all the Reifa Chelim, all the Mata Asurim, all the Mechayim Mesim, all the whatever Hashpois, the Mevarech Hashanim, it's not from the Eibishter. It's from the King of Atzilus. It's like it's creating a certain sense. You can't call it then a Gazim Yad Achitzev. Doesn't seem like just an act of a means for an activity. They seem like they have a ganz, substantive mahus. They are very substantive, these Kelim Atzilus. And they have agency to do what they want to do. How they're going to do it. The king gives them instructions, but after that, he's hands off.
So what's the Aaron Sif doing?
So
what is the Aaron Sif doing?
What? One thing. Just in the moshul. You understand in the moshul why, if that is a moshul...
King the servants.
Yeah. He's mashpia chayas. The chayas that the Kalim have to do what they have to do comes from the Aaron Seif. But it would imply from the moshul that they have their own ratzin. So they have vodims, they have bittul. I'm just saying, well, this is the question of the parties. So the Rebbe Rashab says, "Achini be'emes gamar Rav Menachem Rekanti oimish habayri yisbarich mashpia lemidis lasis pu'ulasam." Now, the Rekanti himself tries to overcome this problem by saying it is the bayris which must be the midis to do that. So their whole pu'ula comes mitzad the hashpa. So it's ki'ilu, they're not independent. But that alone, the Rebbe Rashab says, is not a good enough answer, not a sufficient answer, because they may have the capability of doing the pu'ula from the oir. The Kalim might have the capability of doing the pu'ula from the oir atzilus, but from the moshul it implies that they have the bechira exactly how to employ it. So we're still it's not meaning that the Rakanti was sensitive, was alert to this issue that was brought up by the Parvis, and he attempts, but in truth it hasn't yet fully been answered. And this the Chayra should be b'derech hayishara. So if the person is good, then give him all good things. And the opposite don't. In kinarotzin hu b'hamelech shetiyan hoga ba'ifin kozeh davka v'akol mi itay rak shapu ula b'poyu hi al yidei avodim. So this is the suggestion of the mashal of the Rakanti, that the Eibishter wants that the people who behave well should get hashpah from b'derech hachesed, and the people who don't behave badly should get b'chinas hagvura. But this is all done by the kelim of Atzilus, and therefore the shinoi hashpah that sometimes will be ayidei chesed and sometimes will be ayidei gvura is only a shinoi legabi the kelim, but not legabi the oir. V'animshul b'zehu lahiris shapu'ula b'poyel ba'elamayis nasei dei kelim davke. V'akel b'koyach hapoyel hu ha'inseif hapoyel al yodei u'v'ritzeinei davke. So the al nimshal is what? Everything, any ashboy in the Elamais is the fact that it can have its chalkus, it can have a shaykhus to Elamais, is almost other kelim. The kelim have a shaykhus to Elamais, they have erech Elamais, they have its chalkus, they have akbola, all the things that are necessary in order for ashboy to be able to be nimshach. Taka, I'll give many more tzimtzumim and parsois, but they can be nimshach into the world. But they are merely tools of the Eirin Seif. The Eirin Seif is the koyach hapoyel. But in the Eirin Sof, there's no difference between the Keach HaPoel, which is Poel Chesed, and the Keach HaPoel, which is Poel Gvura. It's Poshet. It's the Chayas of those Kelim. It enables those Kelim to exist. And everything is like how the Eir wants it to be. But for the fact that it can be on one day, it can be Al Yidei Chesed, and Gvura, that's a Shinoi. Can't say there's a Shinoi in the Eibishter. The Eibishter is Poshet, Bliegvul, not Murkov. So this is the model that the Rakanti has for us. That the Eir remains Pashut, remains the sort of the guiding Koyach HaPoyel. There's a difference between the Koyach HaPoyel and the Pu'ula. You can say that somebody, even in koiches, which are already mitsuya, we're not talking about something which is poshut. Keich hamaskil. Keich hamaskil is not yet. You could call it this is not mechuvim what I'm saying, but just to help you think about it. Keich hamaskil is not any particular seichel. It's the koyach in your chelas on seichel. It's not keich yuli. It's not keiches aklulim benefesh. It's already keiches nelomim. It's a koyach which is already mitsuya. It's dafke seichel. It's not tnua. It's not dibur. It's koyach hamaskil. But the koyach hamaskil is not being maskil any particular haskalis. So the poyel, how you maskil haskalis in the brain, it's able to be mashpia, that the brain should be able to understand maths. It can understand history. It can understand chemistry. I don't know. Whatever different types of haskalis, refuah, we give the example here often. All the different haskalis. The Keich HaMaskil doesn't become a medical intellect all of a sudden. Keich HaMaskil remains Pashat. Afalpi, the only reason why you're able to be maskil haskalis harafuah is because of the Keich HaMaskil. It's not nitvas in it. It retains its pshitas. And this is something which isn't even Pashat. It's a relative pshitas, right? So, similarly, the Oir, which maintains and facilitates the Kalim, remains Pashat even though there's all of these different pu'ulis. And this is Chalkus. Okay? That's what we're saying.
It's all very nice once it's already been made. You've got the system in place.
Okay, but we're going to get to that quite a bit later. We're not ready for that yet. So v'lo yasu hakelim dover mi atzmim chas v'shalom. The kelim don't have their own rotzin, that they do things on their own. They don't go rogue and do their own thing. Ki im berotzin ha'ein seif ha'mispash b'hem. It's all based on the rotzin of the ein seif. K'mishkosa Rav Nachman Merikanti mefurish shom be'inyan atfilis b'ma shehevi b'shem hazoya de labal ha'choitim ani mischanim chuli. Because lo yikayir la midah el la beiri yisparach sheyifel la yidei midah. So what does he say over there? The Rakanti says in Atfilis that there's a Zoya. I can't remember the post. There's a post in Yeshaya, I think. It's a post in Yeshaya. You get this lashon. She quotes in the Zoya, Pegmem Ches or something. That there's the chaytim. A chaytim means the nose, but it's also sort of like when we talk about b'chari off, that like so you have the nostrils is a sign of anger, gvura, right? So it's the nose. So it's about about Tehilossi. I can't remember the passing in China. Something like Tehilossi. I can't remember. Look at the passing. I think it's in Pegmem Ches. Maybe does it bring it down here at the bottom? Does it say anywhere? No. It's passing in Yeshaya. Look it up. It's quoted if you look up the Zohar, I'll give you the mocker in the pasuk because it quotes it there. But it says there that lebal ha'chaytim ani mischanim. I'm not davening to the chaytim. I'm not davening to the nose. I'm davening to the possessor of the nose. The one whose nose it is. That's what. Obviously, the pu'ula of gvura, the pu'ula whatever it is of being of noikim or gvura, whatever form of gvura it is, comes from the chaytim. The bal ha'chaytim is poshut. So you're not davening to the chaytim, you're davening to the bala chaytim. All the davening is not to the middays. You don't daven to the middays. You daven to the Eirin Seif, which is in the middah. It's the same with everything. Don't daven to a middah. Keep a middah sha'adam tzarich la kaida la beira she'yifel b'middah hi. This is the lashon of the Rakanti. That you don't daven to the middah, you daven to the Eibishter that he should be poil al yidei that middah. Sari mufurish kanal umikomokim ein zeshinu ba'ha'oy. So, in whatever the case, this resolves the issue of there not being a shinu in the eye. Now we're going to go a bit more deeper, okay? But in and this is from the Amonos course, you should remember. It's well known what was explained and answered with regards to this issue of Shinu Harit Zainais, She'ein Zeh Shinu B'Habei Yisparech, that there's no Shinu in Eibishter. The Eibishter's Rotzen doesn't function like our Rotzen. Just like his Yediyah is not like our Yediyah. How is his Yediyah not like our Yediyah? She'etzleinu Hari Yediyah Hidovan Noisav. The knowledge of something for us is a Dovan Noisav, becomes an acquired additional thing because we previously didn't know it. B'Hayidiyah nitfas b'Hayidiyah. The person becomes affected by this knowledge. And that is what you call a shinu. So this is a whole process. Previously you didn't know something. This yediyah was unknown to this yediyah. There's a moment of learning, of acquiring that knowledge, and then there's post factor, well, after you've learnt it. So we don't say a person is hu yediyah, hu yedua, hu hamada, and there's no difference. For most people, there's a major difference between before they know something and after they know something. So you can't say is yediyah or yedua, and a yediyah doesn't work for a person. That's why ein yedi osei ki yedi oseinu. Masha enkin lamayla yedi hume'ela me'ela. The Eibishter's knowledge of something is not something else from him that he didn't previously know. Everything he knows is innate. So It's also later in the Parsha Vayera in Torah Oir, and the next Maimah, it also talks about this. So just like it is with Yediyah, the same thing is with Ratzin. The Eibishter wants something. It's not, he previously didn't want something, and now he wants something. Elohu Ratzin Echad. But rather, the Eibush and his Ratzin are innately the same thing. So it doesn't mean that he sort of all of a sudden gets affected by having a different Ratzin. When the Eibish's Ratzin changes, Kaviyachal, it's not a change in him. And this Eirin Seif, which is the Eir of the Esses Spheres, okay, it's only a Ha'ara Me'erin Seif, and we're going to get into much more detail about how it's only a Ha'ara, and it's not the same as the Eir Shelifnei Ha'atzilus, Mikol Mokim Hari Ha'eir Hu Me'ein Amoy. It's still Eir, and it's still Me'ein Amoy Mamash. So Kshem Shehu Ein Seif Pasha B'Tachlis. So just like the Eibishter is Pasha B'Tachlis, the Eirin Seif Shelifnei Ha'atzilus, K'mekein is Pashtus Eirin, the Ha'ara of it, which is Mispashit in Eilam Ha'atzilus, is also Ein Seif Pasha B'Tachlis Ha'pshitis. Commission is spoiler, and just like explained above, the Ba'erin Seif Ein Shinu Ratzeinis Eisim Bei Shinui Chas V'Shalim Mipnei She'ein a Nitfis B'Ratzeinai B'Hur Ratzeinai Echad. So just like if you're going to say about the Eirin Seif that there's no such notion of Shinu Ratzeinis having any Shinu in him because he and his Ratzon are the same thing, then the Ei, which is Mispashet from the Eibishter, HaMispashet Mimenu Yisbarich Be'eses V'Eres Datzilus, it's exactly the same thing. That Eir isn't shaykh to have any shinuyim. If we go back to the Maimon, use the mashal which we use in B'Shasha Alameshal Amarim Chavhei of the water, that something which is pashut, that it's not a pshat, a shinui. When someone looks in the water hasn't changed because the image in the water is the water. So when something is not, it's not a davar noisaf on the water. The water is producing the face. So even if the shinuyim come for whatever reason, because someone's walking past the river and lake and looking in the water, and the movement in the water is also coming from the person looking in the water, you still can't say that there's a shinui in the water. Okay, just to help you a little bit. It's not, it's strange, but it still needs to be thought about.
It's a little bit different than like Chachma, because even in like Seichel you can understand that you have two conflicting ideologies, but you can always imagine that there's one that's really the ideology. But in Retainers, if you have two opposite Retainers and you both have them at the same time, then it's a bit confusing.
Saying how can there be pshittas if you have two opposing Retainers?
I mean, obviously you could always argue that these Retainers, he's a Baal Retainers, not that he actually wants them. If he actually wants them, that means he's going to fulfill them. But you could say he's a Baal Retainers, therefore it doesn't affect him. So yes, you could say that.
That one.
But then he wants to make a world, right? So we see that not really. Anyway,
that's Inyan Atzmi. It's not a piseichel.
Not if you're Rotzen as well, I guess, because Rotzen is also
It's a type. It's a different type of thing. Yeah.
kind of.
Ula zois gam kishaha'oir nimshach b'kli chesed. So then, even when this oir, which we've just said is poshut, just like the ma'oir is poshut, is nimshach in the kli chesed. Lifo pulas chesed. Ein ze shinui b'ha'oir ba'etzem chuli kanal. Okay. Top of Amud Zayin. This is not a shinui in the oil. And if you're going to say it's a shinui because of the etzem pu'ul ban ivroim, hari pu'uli al yidei hakelim v'lo ma'er atzmi, ki im ha'oir poyel al yidei hakli, v'hakelim hari melikus chuli k'mash yispoyim yis Hashem. The one the kelim also likus, which we're going to explain a lot later. But for the meantime, we're just focusing on how we distinguish the Eiris and the Kelim. V'nimtza. That's why we find when it comes to davening, Pasuk says, B'chol karenu elov. Yeah? And says in the paradise, elov eloyle midaisav. V'yudua the inyan atfila hu sheyumshach rotzin chodesh aleinu l'rapis achili l'varech hashanim. What's all inyan atfila? We want it to be hamshachas rotzin chodesh. Ba'kriya ela atzmus. Shayirutzin yisbarach la'an nishei chas v'shalom mitzad ma'asav le'toivim. Initially, the reason why it's davening is because there was a rotzen coming out from Atzmus Ein Sof to punish him because of his bad behavior. So he davens, so you're saying he's baruch lehitim le. And you're davening, hoping that there'll be an amshachas rotzen chadash, be nimshach a tifra oir, be nimshach not into midas agvura but into midas achesed. V'hainu sheyumshach oir min ha'atzmus, b'sfiras ha'tiferes, the rapoisoi, ub'sfiras ha'netzach, levarech hashonim, the various different spheres. Through Tiferes, the person should be healed. Through Tiferes HaNetzach, a person should have panasa. So in Yakavona b'shem, Shakavona b'ha'eiris ha'mislapshim b'akelim chuli k'mishkos mokmach. And that's when it comes when you have the kavonas, Kabbalah, and the shemes, different Havaya and Elikenu and Kel, Elikan, all different things and the different nikud of the Shem Havaya is all about the eiris which are mislapshim in the kelim, which is the eiris, which is the main amoy. Ha'kel nimshach me to yisbarich. But the reality is not that there's nothing that's being nimshach, and the rashis hamshacha is from the kelim of Atzilus. No, everything is nimshach from the Eibishter. Haschava in both the reward and the punishment. V'chol tfilasenu hu elav yisbarich, and our davening is to him davik. Ain't a shum shinu chas v'shalom b'yisbarich. But when you say every morning, Yiratzim ufanach Hashem lekeinu, zenu sheibana beis hamikdash meheri amein v'zein chokim v'sarei yehi ratzin. There should be a rotzen chadash. We're not asking that the Yevishah should change. We're asking it should be nimshach. This rotzen through the kelim, so it should be poil in Welt. So we explained like the inyan of the Yevishah, you say baler rotzens, the inyan of yechelas. The Yevishah says yechelas for alle rotzens, and then nimshach mimenu me'elav me'ela. They're not a davar noisav alav. Who rutzayne echad? Who the yecholtei lirtzais kol dava? And therefore, you're able to daven and ask. There should be nimshach that rotzin. But it was it's in yechilas ha'atzmus. It's poshut. You're not asking to be nimshach the proti sticker rotzin that is in atzmus because there's no proti sticker rotzin. It's only yechilas. You're davening from it. It should be nimshach hashpa. And it should be nimshach where? In Netzach, in Tiferes, where you need it for your particular thing. But you're not davening to there's no point, the keli is useless. Mitzad atzmi. The keli is only useful when there's amshach from the mocker. Yeah? Okay. Good. Are we good with that? Can we move on? Okay. Now, now we're going to explain how to Chassidus. Yeah, we put the Rakanti, we put the Pardes. No, with this same Inyan. I'm going to explain it based on a Maimon of the Alter Rebbe. Okay, so there's a Maimon in Tov Kuf Samach Tes, there's a Maimon Eilis Tomid. And then on the Maimon Eilis Tomid, there's a Bir. And you can find it in Memoriad Marzok in Tov Kuf Samach Tes. The beer starts on Omid Reish Lamed Hey. Yep. Okay. So the Rebbe Rashab here is actually going to quote more or less word for word from here. But at certain points he stops and he intersperses with his own beer of what's being said. And obviously there are different. So I'll try and point out where. When we're moving into the Isis of the Rebbe Rashab and when it's the Isis of the Alter Rebbe. So we start off with the Isis of the Alter Rebbe. This is the Lashon Alter Rebbe, starting on Amud Reish Lamed Hey. Yeah. Says like this: Tinei loy kamoi shemuvan licheira besifrei hakabbalah harishenim ha'achareinim the bechol metzia shenishaba me'amatzu yesh beis madreges oir v'kli. So this is like the Shir Samareches. It's not like it's understood lecheira from some of the Sifrei Kabbalah and Rishonim Achreinim that from the Maitzel is Nishava two Madrigas. Madrigas Eir V'Kli. Kumay Metzias HaChochma. That coming out of the Maitzel is a Metzias HaChochma. Shenetzla Meha Maitzel. And that Metzias HaChochma Yesh Ba Beis Madrigas. B'chinas HaEir U B'chinas HaKli. This is Al Derech L'Shitz HaMareches, yes? HaEir Nikra Eir HaChochma V'Akli Nikra Kli HaChochma. K'meshakos B'apar D'Shatz Muz L'Kenim Perek Dalet. The Imkein Masha Nikra Eir HaChochma Hu Metzias Guf HaChochma Atzma. By saying such a thing, what you're suggesting is the Eir itself is already has the identity of Chochma. And there's a distinction between the Eir HaChochma and the Eir HaBinah. And what is the Kli? The Kli is merely Hagbolas HaEir. Hu Hashpoas HaEir Lamata. So it takes the Eir and it enables that Eir HaChochma to be Niskala Lamata. But there's already in the Eir a notion of Chachma, independent of the Kli. Hakli, Letzeleima Hasvira Hachitzena, She Levush El Hatichena, Hu Eir Hamislabish Ba'Kli, Shehu B'Teichi Sepnimis Hakli, Ki Hatichena, Hu Asher Yikari Chachma Ba'amitis, V'zu, Letzeleima Hakli, Levush Eileha, Laharis, Laha Amim, V'Hasorim Es Yefi Nishmosa Hapayeles Ba Chuli Ad Kan L'Shem. So, what's this Lashon? Don't call Chachma Dafka the Kli, meaning the sort of the Poyal Mamish of the spheres, which he calls the Chitzonius of the spheres, and the Levush to the Oy which is mislabish in the Kli, the Levush to the Tichena. Ki Tichena, meaning the Oy which is mislabish in the Kli, is what you should call the Chachma, in truth. And Zu, the Kli, is just a Levush to it, to enable it to be Niskala. So what's it saying? It's saying that the Oir, which is mislabish in the Kli, should also be called Chachma. Now, the Alter Rebbe says, you can't say this. You shouldn't say like this. It's not like it would be, you would think that's what it means. Why? It's lefiza hariyef shaleima bepirush hamayim de sefi yitzira esesfiris blima. The term esesfiris blima would make no sense on such an oath. Why? Because kaleima believe muhus umatzias. The esesfiris don't have any muhus umatzias. Because what you're really saying over here is the oath does have a matzias. Is a matzias of chachma. Machash gam ha'oirs the esesfiris gam hein bechinas matzias muhus dova machanal. If you say, like you said above, it would imply that they do have a Metzias in the Muhus. V'oid, sorry, I didn't tell you. So where it says, just to let you know, where it says Ukumisha Kosuv, B'Pardes Sham, this is an addition of the Rebbe Rashab, all the way down to Ad Kan L'Sheni.
On the same page.
Yeah, and then it says L'Fiza, that's already back to the Alter Rebbe's Maimon. The L'Fiza Hariyef Shalem Lima, all the things, that's really Mustafa Ma. Now the Va'oid is not in the Alter Rebbe's Maimon. This is their Rashab. Va'oid imkein heim b'metzias esesviris esa v'leitesha v'arihu yisbarech chad v'loi v'chushbam v'ha'oir hu me'ein ha'moi v'hu yochid v'eich hein esa. This is feeding to what I said to you at the beginning, that you have these seemingly contradictory statements regarding Atzilus. We do say it's Esses first, Esa v'leitesha, Esa v'lo yachadas. On the other hand, we say it's Esses first, Blima. So the Rebbe Rashab's question here is that if you're going to make them into a Metzias, then how can this Oir be Me'ein HaMo'ir, where the Mo'ir is Chad V'loi V'chushban and is Yochid? So how can the Oir, which is Me'ein HaMo'ir, be Esa? Yeah? Now, back to the Alter Rebbe. Ve'eich yefarish lefizeh. The Alter Rebbe wrote it there. Ve'gam I efshel lefarish. So it's Hamaima. It says ve'eich yefarish lefizeh Hamaima de'ir v'chayuichad de'koy ala eiris de'esa sviris. When we say eir v'chayuichad going on the eiris of Atzilus, that the chayui are chad with ihu. Now the ihu we just said is pashut, is chad. The eich misyachadim legamri bebechinas ha'atzmus achashim bechinas dovama. Metzias dovama. Understand the question? This is again from the Rebbe Rashab. Umitzad zeh yipol bahem metzias mispa esa. And that's why they have this quantity of 10. The hagaha talia. What's hagaha talia? If you're going to say they have Esa, they can't be Iyu v'chayu yichad. And if they're Iyu v'chayu yichad, they can't have Mispa Esa. Haba hatali. If you're an Oy, which is Me'in HaMoy, which is Pashut, Antul Chad, V'li v'chushban, you can't have a chushban. Yeah, but Atmas Eirin Seif Mushlo Mikol Bechinas Metzias. Ukamaima v'lav mikol inun midais klal. Yeah? Lav mikol inun midais klal. And there's a lashon from the Alter Rebbe which he doesn't quote here. He brings it in a little bit later, but it's not here in the lashon of the Alter Rebbe. There is ki hu yisbarich ba'atzmei eir poshet betachlis ha'achtus pshuta kiyudu. That's the lashon here in the Samchtes.
Is it possible that they had different curses?
Yeah, that's a little different. It's possible. But he's working. Well, it's just interesting. If you want to look at the Maimah, you see how it flows in and out. Ela behechrich loimer. This is back to the Alter Rebbe. Ela behechrich loimer be'inyan beis madregus the oir v'kli shebe esas firis the loy kamuvan nechayru b'sifri amakubalim. That it's not like it says in Sifri amakubalim when we talk about the oirs and kalim of the esas firis of Atzilus. Ela pirush ha'oir hu gilui oir hamatzil. Hainu ha'ora min hamatzil ha'el yunein tzibaruchu lahatzil es metzias hanetzal. The pirush of oir is gilui. That we know. And it's gilui of what? The gilui of the matzah. A gilui of something is not the thing itself. Because a thing itself is not in a tnu of gilui. So the gilui is going to be a ha'ara from the thing. But it's a ha'ara of what? It's a ha'ara of the matzah. Yeah. Lahatzil as metzius hanetzel. And it's the oir. The oir of Atzilus is the ne'etzal. It is Atzilus. It is the inyan of Atzilus. V'gufa shel metzias hanetzalim hu anikra kli shel ha'oir. And that let's see, let it explain it. Kumay spheres a chachma shnetzel me amaitzel. Ne beginas kilu ha'oir v'ashefem min amaitzel elyon baruch hu lahatzu metzias ha'chachma nikra oir ha'chachma. The ha'ara from the Eirin Seif, in order to create the netzal, in order to create the inyan of chachma, is called the oir ha'chachma. V'kashik v'netzal metzias ha'chachma ha'nikra metzias ha'chachma yishem beginas kli la'oir ha'matzel shehetzel l'chachma. So once you've already formed the there's formed the inyan of chachma, the actual thing of chachma. That's called the kli to the oy. In kein einer pirish bekli chachma shachachma kva yeshna memetzius va'kli hu rak hagbolos metzius bilvad. So the pshat isn't that the kli chachma is not the first instantiation of chachma. The kliya and the kliya chachma and the real instantiation of chachma is in the oy, and the kli is merely containing that oy and making it palatable to the elamus biyah. Ela gufa shematzias achachma nikra kli. The actual guf matzias achachma is the kli. V'hi atzma bechinas hagbolas ha'oy, and it's taka magbil the oy. Shenimshach ma'amaytzu lahatzel matziusa. That the matzias of the sphera, the matzias of the kli, should be able to be nimshach into the elamis. So it says the Alter Rebbe, ulefi zeh, ulefi zeh, yispari shape mashakos b'seif yitzir the eses firs bli ma hainu bli mehus klal. It can be well understood and explained what it means in the Sefer Yitzir when it says eses firs bli ma, meaning they have no mahus. Ki kol bechinas ha'oisha kol svira eina begeda metzias mahus midas b'siras hadayin. It's a very good description of the oiris of Atzilus, because they taka don't have any metzias and midah and svira. Ela rakshu bechinas gilui oir hanishba min hamaytu lahatul eisa metzias. They're just the horror from the oir which is going to make that metzias, but they're not that metzias. The Kamosha Atmas Amatzla Elyin who Mushla Gamri Militai by Muhus Mugbal Kachachme Vechesed, just like the Matzil itself is completely out of the question to describe the Matzil as having these categories of Chachma or Chesed, because Lavin Kolina Midisklau. Ki hu yisborich ba'asmi betachlis ha'achdus va'pshitus. So kamoy kein ha'ir v'aziv shu yisborich me'im imuhusiv atzmus yisborich hinei ha'order zu gam kein pshut betachlis ha'pshitus va'achdus. Benayla maila mishu yoyim alav geder chachma v'chesed. Yeah?
Yeah.
So that last few lines was from the Rebbe Rashab. Wasn't from the Alter Rebbe. You can probably tell from the style. From the Kamosha Atmas Amatzla Elinu Mushal Legamri Militai Bei Muhus Mugbal Kachachma V'Chesed. Because and so Lachain. Now back to the Alter Rebbe. Lachain Magam came the Iya V'Chayu Ichad Mamish. Why? Because Glefi Anal Hari Kol Bechinas HaOiris the Eses Firis Misyachtim Bechinas Atmas Amatzla B'Tachlis HaYichud. After shehi mushlolim gamkein adayin mikol metzias svira umida kanal. Okay,
right.
That is atkan l'shein of the Alter Rebbe. It's like he does bring now again from the Alter Rebbe, but he's not trying to make it fit. He's not quoting. He explained the next part of the Maimah. He's now going to explain, but he's not following the lashon so tightly. Until now, he's following the lashon very tightly from Samach Tes. So we have the Alter Rebbe makes a very clear distinction between the Eiris, how we should understand the Eiris and the Kalim, that the Eir is Pashut, the Eir is Mein HaMoir, the Eir is Esesfiris Bli Ma, Bli Muhus Metzias, whereas the Kalim are Esa, V'lei Teisha Esa, V'lei Echad Asa. They are Spheres, they are Midah, they are all of those things. So that this is where the Rebbe Rashab says that this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. It's just like the Rebbe Rashab was saying about the Maim the Pasach Liyol in the long bracket we didn't do, saying the Maim hit Pasach Liyol Tovku Samach Vav is Kedas Harakanti. So to the Maim here, what it's explaining is also Kedas Harakanti, and this helps us understand what we're trying to express in the Das Harakanti. She'eses Firis b'chinas Chachma v'Chesed heima Kelim. The Oy which is the Eira Matzah which comes into the Kalim, That's called Atzilus. By calling it Atzilus, we mean to say that it's still Pashut. When we say Spheres, already we're talking then about Hagbola and Seal. So we can now better understand and explain the moshel the Rekanti brings of his two servants. In the nimshal of that, we can explain it to mean that it's like the Eir HaMatzil making the Sphira of Chesed and Gvura. Instead of thinking about it as a moshel to explain the Hashpah Lamata, we're using it now as a moshel to explain the Hatzola, the creation of the Spheres. That even the Mikol Mokim HaOir Ba'atzmi Hu Pashtu Mushlu Megeder Chesed Gvura, that even though the Oir is Nishtalshul, the Ha'or from the Atmas HaMoir, which is Petachas HaPshitus, is Nishtalshul, in order to create and give Chayas to the Kelim, it doesn't, by doing that, become defined by those Kelim. The Oir remains Pashut. So it's like the Eibishter, by the Eibishter telling, in the Moshel, the king telling his Avodim to do this and to do that, does not define the king. By giving those orders, by creating that system of having people who dole out presents and nice things to people who behave themselves, and also to people who misbehave, punishments, doesn't make the Eibishter. The Eibishter doesn't make the Eibishter into a good or a bad. I mean, the king in the Mashal into good or bad. He's not defined by that.
Nobody can know that he is just, even if he does his servant do just things. Could be that he's not just, and whatever he decided to do it one day.
He just facilitates that thing.
There's no definitive Hagabola on him.
Right. He's just enabling it to happen. So here, the Oir is enabling the Kalim to happen. But the Oir does not become defined by those Kalim. This that we say from the Rekanti, that the Kli causes a Hagbola in the Oir. How can you cause a Hagbola in something which is not able to be Mugbal? So if you carry on in the Maim of the Alter Rebbe from Samach Tes, the beer of Neilis Tamid, you'll have a beer of this. What is the beer? It says there, Me'inyan Atzilus Ruchi Shel Moshe al Shivim Ish Az Kenim. How Moshe was able to extend his koyach over the Shivim's kingdom. It wasn't Moshe himself, it was a ha'ara from Moshe. Yeah? So once this ha'ara from Moshe Rabbeinu was nimshach to the Zakenim, it was absorbed by them in their Kalim, their abilities, their Kliyas Saga, which is limited. Definitely look at Fierach to Moshe's. And the Ha'ara from Moshe was only able to be Neskala according to their Kalim. That's why it wasn't just, they didn't just become Nevi'im like Moshe. Moshe still remained very distinct. Shayakos of Meid, Navi Moshe. There was no other Navi like Moshe. So even though the Ruach HaNavuah of Moshe was extended to these Shivim Zakenim, by becoming mislabish in their Kalim Mugbalim, it meant that they weren't able to experience it on the same level as Moshe. V'gam imashi yochel liyos amshachas habasa kasher rucha shel Moshe nachal az Kenim muven sha'ha'ara nitfeso behem lefi erka.
Mistake in the writing.
I'm not sure what he wants to say there. Umikol Mokim. But whilst on the one hand they weren't on the level of Moshe, they were still above and beyond all the other types of Nevi'im. And they did have some erech to Nevuah of Moshe, because their Nevuah was from Moshe's Nevuah, from Ruchish Moshe. We say in the Mishnah that Moshe Kibbutz Torah Sinai, Shulas Kainim Nevi'im. Kainim were superior to Nevi'im. Hari Hoyu has Kainim Lamaila Mehanavim. They were able to be nistavu bezeh just like in a comparable to Moshe, not like other Nevi'im. We're only nistavu b'koi. What Indian? So even though we accept and we acknowledge that there was a hagbola on the ha'ara of Moshe in their limited kalim, it wasn't completely distorted and degraded the quality of the ha'ara, which was separated from Moshe and came and rested on them. Because even though there was a certain hagbola to it, but the etzim, it didn't change, and that's why they had gewaldige abilities. Because be'etzim, there's no real hagbola on it. These Zekanim were they weren't shaykh to have a nevuah like Moshe. How do we see this? Yeshua was very shocked. Came in, meaning that it wasn't. It was way above their abilities, their innate abilities. No one would expect Eldon Meidot to be able to have this capacity. That's why it was a shock, because really, fundamentally, they weren't shaykh to it. It was only because they had Ruchish Moshe. And Oma Moshe, Umi Yitim, for you call Am Hashem Nevi'im. Alavai. Moshe didn't it made perfect sense. They had Ruchish Moshe. Why can't anyone can be a Navi like me if they have my Ruach? Mitzad themselves, they were much more on the level of the people. Elalafisha, you ate some Moshe, Loshna Tzilus. The Hetzel Mirucha Aleim, how you misnabim? Yeah? Right. I'll stop there. We'll carry on tomorrow.